Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from tonight. And let me ask you something. Could you forgive the person you love if everything you knew about them turned out to be a lie? My name is Emily Carter, and 3 years ago, I married the poorest man in a forgotten little village. He owned 2 shirts, lived in a wooden house with a leaking roof, and rode an old motorcycle that sometimes needed to be pushed uphill. Everyone laughed at me. My relatives called me desperate. My former fiancé said I had ruined my life. But on the morning after our second wedding anniversary, 12 black cars appeared outside our home. Men in tailored suits stepped into the mud and bowed their heads to my husband. Then one of them said the words that changed everything. "Mr. Harrison, the board is waiting. Your company cannot survive another day without you." That was how I discovered that the poor village man sleeping beside me was not poor at all. He was one of the richest men in the world. And somehow, that was only the beginning of the nightmare. I grew up believing that love was something sensible people could control. My mother used to say, "Emily, choose a man with a good heart." My father disagreed. "A good heart doesn't pay hospital bills," he would say. "Choose a man who can protect your future." For most of my life, I followed my father's advice. I studied business administration, moved to the city, and found a job at an international property development company. By the time I was 27, I had a good apartment, a respectable salary, and a fiancé named Adrian Cole. Adrian was handsome, ambitious, and very aware of both qualities. His family owned several construction companies. He wore expensive watches and made sure people noticed them. When we walked into a restaurant, waiters recognized him. When we attended corporate events, people wanted to speak with him. From the outside, we looked perfect. Inside our relationship, I always felt as if I were applying for a position I had not yet earned. Adrian criticized the way I dressed, the way I laughed, and even the way I spoke to servers. "People are always watching us," he would say. "You need to understand what kind of life we're building." Whenever I objected, he bought me flowers. Whenever he embarrassed me in public, he sent jewelry to my office the following morning. I mistook apology gifts for love, because I did not yet understand that love should not create the wound before offering the bandage. 3 months before our wedding, my mother became ill. At first, the doctors believed it was exhaustion. Then came more tests, more hospital visits, and finally a diagnosis that left our entire family silent. Cancer. It had already spread. My mother had grown up in a mountain village called Willow Creek, nearly 6 hours from the city. It was the kind of place that barely appeared on maps. She had left when she was 19, but she always spoke about it as though part of her remained there. When the doctors told her that treatment might only give her a little more time, she made one request. "I want to go home." My father did not understand. "This is your home," he told her. She smiled gently. "No, this is where I lived. Willow Creek is where I learned who I was." I asked my company for temporary leave and arranged to take her there. Adrian was furious. "Our wedding is in 3 months," he said. "There are meetings, fittings, invitations. Your mother needs professional care, not some village superstition." "She's dying, Adrian." "We're all dying, Emily. That doesn't mean we abandon our responsibilities." Those words stayed with me. I looked at the man I was supposed to marry and realized that he was not afraid of losing my mother. He was afraid her death would inconvenience his wedding. I took off my engagement ring and placed it on his desk. For the first time since I had met him, Adrian had nothing to say. I left the city the following morning. I believed I was going to Willow Creek to say goodbye to my mother. I did not know I was also saying goodbye to the person I had been. The road to Willow Creek narrowed as we climbed into the mountains. Tall buildings disappeared, cell phone signals faded, asphalt became gravel and gravel became dirt. My mother sat beside me in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blue blanket. Even though pain had made her face thin, she smiled when she saw the hills. "It still looks the same," she whispered. Then the rain began. It came suddenly and violently, striking the windshield so hard that I could barely see. A few miles outside the village, I reached an old wooden bridge crossing a swollen river. Halfway across, the car stopped. I turned the key again and again, but the engine only clicked. The rain continued to fall. The river rose beneath us. My mother tried to calm me, but I could hear the fear in her voice. Then someone appeared through the rain. A man in a dark jacket ran toward us from the other side of the bridge. He opened my door and shouted over the storm. "You need to get out, the supports are moving." "My mother can't walk. I'll carry her." Before I could argue, he opened the passenger door and carefully lifted my mother into his arms. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and completely soaked. Mud covered his boots. His hair fell across his forehead, and there was a small scar above his left eyebrow. He carried my mother off the bridge as though she weighed nothing. Seconds after we reached solid ground, part of the railing collapsed into the river. I stood there shaking. The stranger removed his jacket and placed it around my mother. "My house is close," he said. "We can wait there until the storm weakens." I hesitated. He seemed to notice. "My name is Daniel," he said. "Daniel Reed. Ask anyone in Willow Creek. They'll tell you I'm mostly harmless." My mother laughed softly. It was the first time I had heard her laugh in weeks. Daniel's house stood at the edge of the village beneath an enormous oak tree. It was small and old, with faded walls and a roof patched with mismatched pieces of metal. Inside, however, everything was clean. There were handmade shelves, a simple wooden table, a fireplace, and more books than I expected. Daniel placed my mother in the best chair and made tea with ginger and wild honey. He found dry blankets and started a fire. When he asked about her medication, I explained her condition. His expression changed. Not to pity, to understanding. "My mother was sick for a long time," he said quietly. "I know what those nights are like." He knew how to position the cushions behind my mother's back. He knew how to help her breathe when the pain became sharp. He even recognized the name of one of her medications and warned me that it could make her dizzy. "You don't sound like a village farmer," I said. He gave me a faint smile. "And you don't sound like someone who enjoys being wrong." I almost laughed. The storm lasted until evening. By then, several villagers had arrived after hearing about the broken bridge. They greeted my mother with tears and embraces. Many remembered her as the girl who used to climb apple trees and sing during harvest celebrations. Daniel repaired my car the following morning. When I asked what I owed him, he shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. At least let me pay for the parts." "I used parts from an old truck." "Then let me pay for your time." He looked at me for a moment. "Have tea with me someday." I thought he was joking. He was not. "Is that how you charge everyone?" "Only people who accuse me of being a farmer." "You aren't a farmer." "I grow vegetables, I repair engines, I build furniture, sometimes I help at the clinic." "That sounds like at least 4 jobs." "In Willow Creek, everyone has 4 jobs." My mother watched us from the doorway. Later, as we drove toward my grandmother's old home, she leaned toward me and whispered, "That man has kind eyes." I rolled mine. "Mother, we have known him for 1 day." Sometimes 1 day tells you more than 5 years. I knew she was talking about Adrian. I pretended not to understand. The village welcomed my mother as if she had never left. Our family's old house had been empty for years, but neighbors helped us clean it. Someone brought fresh bread. Someone else repaired the water pump. An elderly woman named Martha arrived with soup and refused to leave until my mother had eaten 2 bowls. Daniel came every morning. At first, he came to repair things. A broken window. A loose step. A leaking pipe. Then he began arriving even when nothing was broken. He brought herbs for tea, vegetables from his garden, and books for my mother. He never stayed too long, but he always seemed to know when we needed help. I began to notice things about him. He spoke gently to elderly people. He crouched when talking to children, so they did not have to look up at him. He listened more than he spoke. He never interrupted. And despite his rough clothes and calloused hands, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that did not belong to a man who felt inferior to anyone. One afternoon, I found him reading a financial newspaper outside the village clinic. "You're interested in international markets?" I asked. He folded the paper. "Sometimes. The article you're reading is about a complicated merger." "Is it?" "You've underlined the paragraph about debt restructuring." He glanced at the page. "I like learning new things." "You also have notes in the margin." "Maybe I like learning carefully." I sat beside him. "The company in that article is making a mistake." He raised an eyebrow. "What mistake?" "They're expanding too quickly. Their cash flow can't support the acquisitions. They're using borrowed money to create the appearance of growth." Daniel smiled. "That is exactly what they're doing." "You already knew." "I had a suspicion." I looked at his notes again. They were not the notes of a curious farmer. They were precise, analytical, and better than most of the work I had seen from executives in the city. "Where did you study?" I asked. His smile disappeared. "Different places." "That isn't an answer." "It is the only answer I have today." I should have been suspicious. Instead, I became curious. My mother's condition worsened during our second month in Willow Creek. Some nights she cried out from the pain. Other nights she became confused and called me by her sister's name. Daniel began sleeping in the chair near our front door, so I would not be alone. He never entered my mother's room unless I asked. He simply remained close enough to help. One night, after she finally fell asleep, I stepped outside and found him sitting beneath the porch light. "I'm scared," I admitted. He looked toward the dark mountains. "I know. I thought I would have more time." "We always think that." I spent years being too busy to visit her. I answered her calls while checking emails. I canceled dinners. I forgot her birthday once. "She knew you loved her." "How can you know that?" "Because every time she looks at you, she looks proud." I sat beside him. "What happened to your mother?" Daniel was quiet for so long that I thought he would not answer. "She died believing I had chosen my work over her." "Had you?" "Yes." The word was almost a whisper. I told myself I was building something important. I kept postponing visits. There was always another meeting, another crisis, another person telling me the world would collapse if I stepped away. What happened? The world kept moving, she didn't. He stared at his hands. I would give everything I owned for one more ordinary afternoon with her. At the time, I assumed that everything meant his house, his old motorcycle, and the few tools in his workshop. I had no idea how much everything truly was. My mother died at sunrise on a quiet Sunday morning. There was no thunder. No dramatic final speech. She opened her eyes, looked at me, and said, "You are stronger than you think." Then she turned toward Daniel. "Take care of her heart." Daniel lowered his head. "I will if she lets me." My mother smiled. A few minutes later, she was gone. The village held her funeral beneath the old church bell. People came from miles away. They told stories about the fearless girl my mother had once been. They brought flowers from their gardens and filled the churchyard with color. Adrian arrived in a black luxury car halfway through the service. He wore a dark suit and sunglasses, though the sky was cloudy. He waited until the burial ended before approaching me. "I'm sorry," he said. I thanked him. He looked at Daniel, who stood several feet behind me. "So this is why you stopped answering my messages." "Today is not the day, Adrian. I drove 6 hours to be here." "You came because you wanted to be seen here." His jaw tightened. I came to take you home. This is my home right now. He glanced at the simple house, the muddy roads, and Daniel's worn boots. You cannot be serious. Daniel stepped closer. She said today is not the day. Adrian looked him up and down. And who are you? Someone who knows when to leave. For a moment, I thought Adrian might strike him. Instead, he laughed. Emily, is this what you replaced me with? The villagers grew silent. I felt the old instinct to avoid embarrassment, to apologize, to keep everyone comfortable. Then I remembered my mother's final words. You are stronger than you think. I didn't replace you, I said. I finally saw you. Adrian's face changed. He removed the engagement ring from his pocket and held it out. I kept this because I knew you would come to your senses. I did not take it. You should sell it. For what? Maybe the money can buy you a personality. Martha, standing nearby, coughed to hide a laugh. Adrian looked at Daniel again. You think she'll stay here with you? Emily needs a certain kind of life. Daniel's voice remained calm. Then she should choose that life herself. Adrian climbed into his car and drove away. After the funeral, I found Daniel behind the church. You didn't have to defend me, I said. I know. Adrian could cause trouble for you. I have survived worse men. There was something in his voice I did not understand. I was too exhausted to question it. I don't know what to do now, I admitted. Daniel looked toward the graves beneath the trees. You don't need to decide today. My leave from work is ending. Do you want to return? I thought about my apartment, my office, and the life that had once seemed so important. No. Then don't. It isn't that simple. It usually isn't, but simple and easy are not the same thing. I stayed in Willow Creek. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I began helping at the village clinic because they needed someone who could manage records and funding applications. I used my business experience to apply for grants. I helped local farmers organize a cooperative so they could negotiate better prices. For the first time in years, my work felt connected to actual people rather than numbers on a screen. Daniel and I became inseparable. He taught me how to repair a fence. I taught him how to create spreadsheets that did not look like they had been designed during a power outage. We argued about music, coffee, and whether soup counted as a complete dinner. He always claimed it did. I always claimed he was wrong. 6 months after my mother's death, he took me to the hill above Willow Creek. The valley stretched beneath us, filled with golden evening light. Daniel held out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring carved from dark walnut, with a tiny piece of polished river stone set into the center. I know this isn't what you imagined, he said. It's beautiful. I don't have much to offer. That was what I believed. But I can promise that you will never face a difficult night alone. I can promise that I will listen even when the truth hurts. And I can promise that as long as I breathe, there will always be a place beside me that belongs to you. My eyes filled with tears. Emily Carter, will you marry me? I said yes before he finished asking. We were married in the village church the following spring. I wore my mother's dress. Martha altered it by hand, replacing damaged lace and sewing tiny white flowers along the sleeves. Daniel wore a borrowed suit that was slightly too large at the shoulders. Our reception was held outdoors beneath strings of lights. The villagers brought food, music, and enough homemade wine to make the pastor dance. It was not elegant. It was not expensive. It was perfect. My father attended, but he did not smile. After my mother's illness, he had returned to the city and buried his grief inside work. He believed I had abandoned my future. You could still change your mind, he told me before the ceremony. I don't want to. You barely know this man. I know how he treats people who can do nothing for him. That does not make him capable of providing for you. I can provide for myself. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. He looked toward Daniel, who was helping an elderly guest carry a chair. You were supposed to marry someone successful. Successful at what? My father did not answer. Two of my cousins whispered during the reception. I heard them discussing Daniel's old house and wondering whether we had indoor plumbing. One posted a photograph online with the caption, "From corporate princess to village wife, love really is blind." Adrian sent me a message that night. When you get tired of pretending poverty is romantic, call me. I deleted it. Daniel and I began married life in his small wooden house. The roof still leaked in one corner. The kitchen window refused to close in winter. The old motorcycle broke down so often that we gave it a name. Patricia. Yet those were some of the happiest days of my life. We cooked together. We worked together. On rainy evenings, we sat beside the fireplace and read. Daniel sometimes woke from nightmares, his body tense and his breathing unsteady. Whenever I asked what he had dreamed, he said he could not remember. There were other mysteries. He spoke several languages. He knew exactly how to tie a formal bow tie, though he claimed he had only worn one twice. He could identify expensive wine, but preferred cheap village cider. Once, a tourist visiting Willow Creek stared at him for several seconds and asked whether they had met. Daniel denied it and left the cafe. There were also phone calls. He kept an old black phone locked in a drawer beneath his tools. Every few weeks it rang. Whenever he answered, he walked into the forest. When he returned, his expression was always distant. I asked him about it once. An old friend, he said. You keep your old friends in locked drawers. He has a complicated personality. I laughed, but Daniel did not. I should have pushed harder. Instead, I trusted him. Trust is strange. It can take years to build, but sometimes it begins with a single moment when someone carries your dying mother across a broken bridge. For nearly 2 years, Daniel gave me no reason to doubt that moment. Then Willow Creek received a letter from Harrison Global Development. And the life we had built began to crack. Harrison Global was one of the largest corporations in the world. It owned hotels, technology companies, shipping networks, energy projects, and vast amounts of land. Its founder, Richard Harrison, had built the company from a small transportation business into an international empire. After his death, control passed to a board of directors and a mysterious heir who had not appeared in public for several years. Business magazines called the heir the vanished billionaire. Some said he was living on a private island. Others claimed he had suffered a breakdown. There were even rumors that he was dead. I never paid much attention to those stories. Until Harrison Global announced plans to build a luxury mountain resort in Willow Creek. The proposed development included hotels, private villas, a golf course, and a shopping district. It also required most of our village to disappear. The letter described the project as an opportunity. Jobs, new roads, tourism, economic growth. But buried inside the documents were land acquisition agreements that would force families to sell properties their ancestors had owned for generations. The company offered money, but not enough for most villagers to start new lives elsewhere. A public meeting was held in the church hall. Representatives from Harrison Global arrived wearing polished shoes that collected mud with every step. The lead representative was a man named Victor Lang. He spoke as if the decision had already been made. This development will bring Willow Creek into the modern economy, he said. You should consider yourselves fortunate. Martha stood up. My husband is buried here. My parents are buried here. Should I consider myself fortunate when your machines dig beside them? Victor smiled without warmth. We understand that change can be emotional. Daniel sat beside me, completely still. I could feel anger radiating from him. When the meeting ended, Victor approached us. His eyes stopped on Daniel's face. For 1 second, all color disappeared from his expression. Mr. Daniel stepped forward. My name is Daniel Reed. Victor swallowed. Yes, of course. They stared at each other. Then Victor gathered his papers and left. What was that? I asked. I don't know. He recognized you. No, he didn't. You're a terrible liar. Daniel looked toward the door. Emily, stay out of this project. I stared at him. They're trying to destroy our home. I know. Then help me fight them. It may be safer if you let the legal process take its course. Safer for whom? He did not answer. The following weeks were filled with meetings, petitions, and research. I organized the villagers and contacted environmental lawyers. We discovered that the proposed resort would damage the river system and increase the risk of landslides. Daniel helped quietly but refused to appear publicly. He translated technical documents, identified weaknesses in the company's financial projections, and somehow knew which board members had supported the development. How do you know this? I demanded. I read. These names are not public. Information travels. To your locked phone. His face tightened. Emily. No, I'm tired of half answers. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Who are you talking to in the forest? Someone from my past. What past? One I left behind. Why? Because it destroyed everyone I loved. I waited for more. None came. That night, we slept with our backs turned to each other. It was the first time distance entered our bed. The next morning, Daniel apologized. He told me that he had once worked for a wealthy family. He said there had been an accident, betrayal, and legal problems. I cannot explain everything yet, he said, but I have never harmed you. That isn't the same as telling me the truth. I know. Are we in danger? He hesitated. That hesitation frightened me more than any answer. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said. I looked at the wooden ring on my finger. Daniel, I didn't ask whether you would protect me. I asked whether we were in danger. Before he could respond, the locked phone rang. This time, I was standing beside the drawer. Daniel did not move quickly enough. I opened it. The screen displayed a name. Samuel Price. Beneath the name was a photograph of an older man standing outside the headquarters of Harrison Global. I recognized him from the research I had done the previous evening. Samuel Price was the corporation's chief legal officer. I looked at my husband. Tell me why Harrison Global's chief lawyer is calling a village mechanic. Daniel's face became pale. Emily put down the phone. I answered it. A man's voice spoke immediately. Ethan, you need to come back. Malcolm has discovered where you are. I slowly turned toward my husband. Who is Ethan? The line went silent. Daniel closed his eyes. And for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that the man I had married did not exist. Daniel tried to speak. I could not listen. I walked out of the house and kept walking until I reached the river. He followed me. Emily, please. Do not call me that as if you know me. I do know you. You lied about your name. My name is Daniel Ethan Harrison. Harrison. He said nothing. I turned toward him. The river rushed behind us. Harrison as in Harrison Global. And yes, my legs felt weak. You own the company trying to take our village. Not exactly. That is not an answer. I inherited controlling shares, but I have not managed the company for years. My uncle and the board have been operating it. Your uncle? Malcolm Harrison, my father's younger brother. I laughed, but the sound did not feel human. You told me you repaired engines for a living. I do repair engines. You told me you had nothing. I wanted nothing. That is different. I know. Do you? My voice rose. Do you understand that I stood beside you while people laughed at your torn jacket? I worried about money. I worked late to help us repair the roof. I sold my mother's necklace when the clinic needed medicine because I thought we had no other choice. I bought the necklace back. I froze. What? It is in the bank in the city. I could not let it disappear. You knew. And yes. And you let me sell it. I knew that stopping you would raise questions. I slapped him. The sound echoed across the water. Daniel did not move. Tears filled his eyes, but he did not defend himself. You watched me sacrifice the last gift my mother gave me because protecting your secret mattered more. I was trying to protect you. From what? From the people who killed my brother. The anger inside me stopped for half a second. Daniel looked toward the hills. My father built Harrison Global with his closest friend, Samuel Price. When my father died, my older brother, Nathan, became chief executive. I became head of strategy. His voice was flat, as though each word had been carried too many times. Nathan discovered that Malcolm and several board members were using shell companies to steal money. They were also bribing officials and forcing communities from valuable land. Like Willow Creek. And yes, Nathan planned to expose them. Before he could, his car went off a bridge. I remembered Daniel's nightmares. I was supposed to be in that car, he continued. Nathan changed seats with me because I had worked all night and fallen asleep. He died, I lived. I wanted to remain angry. I was angry, but I could hear the grief beneath every word. Why didn't you go to the police? The investigation was controlled. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses changed their statements. Samuel helped me escape before Malcolm could arrange a second accident. So you hid here. My mother's family came from this region. Daniel Reed was the name she used when she traveled privately. I chose Willow Creek because no one connected it to my father. And then you married me. I fell in love with you. You married me under a false name. My vows were not false. How am I supposed to believe that? He stepped closer. Because every morning beside you was the first honest life I ever had. I backed away. You do not get to call it honest. Before he could reply, we heard engines. One black vehicle appeared on the road. Then another. Then another. By the time we returned to the house, 12 luxury cars were parked outside. Men in dark suits stood across our yard. Samuel Price stepped from the first car. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and tired eyes. He walked toward Daniel and lowered his head. Mr. Harrison, the board is waiting. Your company cannot survive another day without you. Several villagers had gathered nearby. Martha stared at my husband. My father, who had arrived that morning to discuss the land project, stood beside his car with his mouth open. Samuel looked at me. You must be Mrs. Harrison. No, I said. Apparently I'm Mrs. Someone I've never met. Daniel flinched. Samuel's expression softened. I am sorry, I advised him to tell you. When? Many times. And yet all of you decided I was safer as a fool. No one thinks you are a fool. Then stop treating me like one. Samuel turned to Daniel. Malcolm plans to approve the Willow Creek acquisition tomorrow. Once the contracts are signed, even you may not be able to stop it. We need you in the city tonight. Daniel looked at me. Come with me. No. Emily, I can fix this. You cannot fix what happened between us in a boardroom. I know, but I can stop the project. Then do it. Please come. I need to know whether a single part of my marriage was real. His voice broke. All of it. Except your name, your family, your wealth, your education, your past, and the people trying to kill you. Daniel looked as if I had struck him again. I removed the wooden ring from my finger and placed it in his hand. Go save your company, Mr. Harrison. Then I walked into the house and closed the door. By evening, Daniel's face was everywhere. News channels interrupted regular programming. Ethan Harrison, missing heir to the Harrison global fortune, had returned. Photographs appeared from a life I had never seen. Daniel in a tuxedo beside presidents. Daniel speaking at economic conferences. Daniel standing on the deck of a yacht. Daniel graduating from an elite university. Daniel with his brother, Nathan, outside a glass tower bearing their family name. He looked younger in the photographs. Sharper. Colder. The man on the screen wore watches, worth more than our entire village. The man I loved wore a wooden ring and forgot where he left his boots. I did not know which one was real. My father came into the kitchen carrying his phone. Emily, do you understand what this means? And yes. You are married to Ethan Harrison. I understand. His personal fortune is estimated at $18 billion. I heard the reporter. My father stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. Pride. Not because I had built something meaningful. Not because I had cared for my dying mother. Because I had accidentally married a billionaire. You need to go to him, he said. No. This is your husband. Yesterday, you thought he was a failure. I did not know who he was. That is exactly the problem. My father frowned. What do you mean? Daniel treated you with respect when you believed he was poor. You treated him like dirt. Now that you know he is rich, you suddenly think our marriage matters. I was concerned about your future. You were concerned about status. And what are you concerned about, pride? Trust. He lowered his voice. Do not throw away a life most people can only dream about. I looked around the little kitchen. The table Daniel had built. The chipped cups we used every morning. The curtain he had hung crooked and refused to admit was crooked. I already had the life I dreamed about. The next morning, the board meeting was broadcast live. Daniel entered Harrison Global Headquarters through a crowd of reporters. He wore a black suit. For 1 second, he looked directly into a camera. Even through the screen, I could see that he had not slept. Inside the boardroom, he presented evidence against his uncle. Bank records. Secret payments. Documents Nathan had collected before his death. Daniel accused Malcolm of corruption, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. Malcolm denied everything. Then he produced documents bearing Daniel's electronic signature. According to those documents, Daniel had authorized several of the land acquisitions himself, including the project in Willow Creek. Reporters shouted questions. The company's stock price collapsed. Daniel insisted that the signatures were fraudulent. Malcolm smiled. You disappeared for 3 years, he said. You abandoned your responsibilities. Now you return with accusations because you regret your decisions. Daniel demanded an independent investigation. The board refused. Malcolm then revealed photographs of our wedding. The images appeared on screens across the room. Me in my mother's dress. Daniel in his borrowed suit. Villagers dancing beneath strings of lights. Malcolm leaned toward the microphone. My nephew did not disappear because he was in danger. He abandoned the company to indulge in a rural fantasy. Now his wife's village stands in the way of an important development, and he is using corporate power to protect his personal interests. The board voted to suspend the Willow Creek project temporarily. It was not a victory. It was a delay. That afternoon, Daniel called me. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I answered. "Are you safe?" he asked. And yes. "Malcolm knows about you now. Samuel is sending security. I do not want strangers outside my house. This is not negotiable. You do not get to make decisions for me anymore. Emily, this is about your life." My life was peaceful until 12 cars arrived. I should have told you. And yes, I was afraid. So was I still told you the truth. He was silent. I hated that I could picture his face. I hated that I still wanted to reach through the phone and touch him. "Did you sign those documents?" I asked. "No." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet." "Then prove it." "Will that change anything between us?" I closed my eyes. "I don't know." "That is more hope than I deserve." Before ending the call, he said, "The necklace is being delivered tomorrow. I don't want anything from Ethan Harrison." "It is not from him." "Then who is it from?" "The man who sat beside you after your mother died." I ended the call before he could hear me cry. The necklace arrived in a plain wooden box. It was a silver pendant shaped like a leaf. My mother had worn it for as long as I could remember. Beneath it was a letter in Daniel's handwriting. "Emily, I know returning this cannot erase the moment when you believed you had to sell it. I know love does not excuse deception. I kept telling myself that silence protected you. The truth is that silence protected me. I was afraid that once you knew who I had been, you would never again see the man I became beside you. You taught me that an ordinary life is not a small life. You taught me that a person's value has nothing to do with how many people stand when he enters a room. I do not expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that loving you was never part of the lie." "Daniel." "Not Ethan." "Daniel." I folded the letter and placed it beside the wooden ring. For several days, I barely slept. Security officers remained near the village, despite my protests. Reporters waited at the main road. Some portrayed me as an innocent woman deceived by a billionaire. Others called me a fortune hunter who had helped Daniel stage his disappearance. My former coworkers contacted me. Relatives who had mocked my wedding suddenly wanted interviews. My cousin deleted her old caption and reposted the wedding photograph with the words, "I always knew their love was special." Adrian arrived on the 4th day. He parked outside the clinic and watched me load medical supplies. "You look tired," he said. "What do you want?" "To help." I almost laughed. Adrian held up a folder. "My family's company has worked with Harrison Global. I know people inside." "And so?" "So, I know Malcolm Harrison will destroy Daniel. His name is Ethan." "Interesting, you still call him Daniel." I closed the vehicle door. "Get to the point." "Malcolm has offered to increase the village compensation. He wants the project approved quickly." "It won't be." "You cannot stop it, but you can negotiate." "Why are you here?" Adrian stepped closer. "Because I can protect you from the scandal. File for divorce, say you were manipulated. My lawyers will handle everything." "And what do you receive?" "Some contracts." There it was. The truth he believed everyone shared. "You want me to help Malcolm take Willow Creek, so your company can receive construction work. I want both of us to benefit. You came to my mother's funeral and insulted the man who carried her through a storm. Now you want to use my marriage to make money. He lied to you." "And yes. So why defend him?" "I am not defending him. I am defending people who live here." Adrian's voice hardened. "You always become emotional when when you should be practical. And you always become cruel when you think cruelty makes you powerful. He grabbed my arm. You are making a mistake. A voice spoke behind him. Take your hand off her. It was Samuel Price. He stood beside one of the security officers. Adrian released me. Samuel waited until Adrian drove away. Then he handed me a small flash drive. What is this? Something Daniel does not know I kept. I stared at him. Why give it to me? Because you are the only person he trusts who is not controlled by Harrison Global. Inside the clinic office, I connected the drive to an old computer. It contained videos recorded by Nathan Harrison. In the first video, Nathan sat behind a desk. If you are watching this, he said, Malcolm knows I have discovered the land network. He explained that Malcolm had created shell companies to purchase land before Harrison Global announced development projects. Local officials were bribed. Families were pressured to sell. Once the land transferred, Malcolm's private companies made enormous profits. Nathan had discovered something else. The person authorizing the transactions used Ethan's access codes. Ethan does not know, Nathan said into the camera. Malcolm is setting him up. If anything happens to me, Ethan will be blamed. My hands began to shake. The final video was recorded inside a car. Nathan looked frightened. I sent copies of the evidence to Samuel. Ethan believes we are going to meet the investigators tomorrow. I have not told him that Malcolm threatened our mother before her death. The screen shook. Someone opened the car door. The video ended. I looked at Samuel. Why didn't you release this? Because Malcolm controlled the investigators and the original financial records disappeared. A video accusation is not enough. We needed the matching transaction files. Where are they? Nathan hid them. Daniel doesn't know where. No. Then why give this to me? Samuel looked toward the window. Nathan visited Willow Creek several months before he died. I felt cold. Why? He was investigating the resort project. He believed Malcolm had been using the area for illegal land transfers. Did Daniel know? No, Nathan came alone. Samuel handed me an old photograph. Nathan stood outside my grandmother's house. Beside him was my mother. On the back, she had written a date and 4 words. For the girl who listens. I stared at the handwriting. What does it mean? Samuel shook his head. I was hoping you would know. My mother had left me one final secret. And somehow, it was connected to the dead brother of the man I had married. My mother used to tell me stories when I was a child. Most were simple village legends. A woman who followed a white deer into the mountains. A bell buried beneath the church. A girl who heard music inside the river and discovered a hidden cave. I had forgotten most of them. But that night, as I studied the photograph, one sentence returned to me. The river tells its secrets only to the girl who listens. At sunrise, I walked to the old bridge where I had first met Daniel. The damaged section had been repaired, but beneath it, the water continued to strike the rocks in a steady rhythm. I followed the river upstream. When I was young, my mother had shown me a narrow path hidden behind willow trees. It led to a small stone shelter once used by shepherds. Inside, the walls were covered with names carved by generations of village children. I found my mother's initials. Beside them were newer marks. Then H. Nathan Harrison. Below the initials, a small arrow pointed toward the floor. One stone was loose. I lifted it and found a metal box sealed inside plastic. My heart pounded. The box contained a hard drive, copies of land records, and a handwritten letter addressed to my mother. Margaret, I do not know whether I will return. Your daughter works in corporate property development. You told me she sees patterns other people miss. If anything happens to me, give these records to her when the time is right. Do not trust the company. Do not trust the board. And please tell Ethan that none of this was his fault. Nathan. I sat on the cold stone floor, holding the letter. My mother had known. Perhaps she had intended to tell me before her illness worsened. Perhaps she had been waiting for the right moment. Or perhaps she believed the secret would remain buried forever. I returned to the village and called Samuel. Tell Daniel I found Nathan's files. There was a long silence. Where? That doesn't matter. Can they prove the signatures were forged? If the records are complete, yes. I will bring them to the city myself. No, it is too dangerous. I am done letting other people decide what I can handle. 2 hours later, I left Willow Creek with Samuel and 4 security officers. The city looked strange when we arrived. Too bright. Too crowded. Too loud. Harrison Global Headquarters rose above downtown like a glass mountain. As our vehicle entered the underground garage, another car blocked the exit. Men stepped out. They were not police. Samuel shouted for me to stay down. The next few seconds became noise and movement. Security officers left our vehicle. A window shattered. Someone grabbed my door handle. Then the garage lights went dark. Emergency alarms began to sound. A hand pulled me from the opposite side. I fought until I heard a familiar voice. Emily, it's me. Daniel. He guided me behind a concrete wall as security teams flooded the garage. When the lights returned, the attackers were gone. Daniel held my shoulders. Are you hurt? No. His face was thinner than when he had left the village. A bruise darkened his jaw. What happened to you? Malcolm's version of a board discussion. Despite everything, my hand rose toward the bruise. I stopped myself before touching him. Daniel noticed. Pain crossed his face. You should not have come here, he said. I found Nathan's evidence. Samuel carried the metal box toward us. Daniel stared at it. Then he saw the letter. His hands trembled as he read. For several seconds, the billionaire heir, the man whose name moved markets, looked like a frightened younger brother. He thought I blamed him, Daniel whispered. Did you? I blamed myself. Nathan said it was not your fault. Daniel pressed the letter to his chest. I spent years wishing he had taken his own seat that morning. I touched his arm. This is what Malcolm wants. He wants you to believe surviving was a crime. Daniel looked at me. It was the first gentle touch I had offered since learning the truth. Neither of us moved. Then Samuel interrupted. We need to copy the files and send them to multiple authorities before Malcolm knows what we have. He already knows, Daniel said. How? Daniel looked toward the damaged vehicle. Because only 3 people knew Emily was coming. Samuel's expression changed. One of the security officers had betrayed us. And Malcolm was no longer trying only to take the village. He was trying to erase everyone who could stop him. Harrison Global's annual foundation gala was scheduled for the following evening. Malcolm planned to use the event to reassure investors and announce the final approval of the Willow Creek Resort. Daniel wanted to cancel it. Samuel disagreed. Every major shareholder, journalist, and regulator will be in one room, he said. We may never have another opportunity like this. The plan was simple, which meant it was probably dangerous. We would release Nathan's evidence during Malcolm's speech. Copies of the files would be sent simultaneously to reporters, financial regulators, and prosecutors in several countries. Daniel wanted me to remain in a secure location. I refused. This began with land records my mother protected, I said. I will be there. He looked frustrated. You could be hurt. So could you. That is different. No, Daniel, that is the kind of thinking that created all these lies. You decide what I should know. You decide what risks I can take. You call it protection, but protection without respect is another kind of prison. He lowered his eyes. You're right. The answer surprised me. He continued, I am still learning how to love someone without controlling the danger around them. And I am still learning whether I can trust you. I know. I wore a simple blue dress to the gala. Daniel had offered access to an entire room of designer clothing. I told him I would rather wear one dress that belonged to me than 100 dresses chosen for Ethan Harrison's wife. When I entered the ballroom beside him, hundreds of people turned to look. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed us. Daniel wore a black tuxedo, but the wooden wedding ring remained on his finger. I noticed it immediately. He saw me looking. I never took it off, he said. I took mine off. I know. Malcolm Harrison greeted us near the stage. He was in his late 50s, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. So this is the famous village bride, he said. My name is Emily. Of course. He took my hand before I could pull it away. You have caused my nephew a great deal of confusion. Your nephew seems more confused when people attempt to murder him. Malcolm's smile remained. Rural people often possess colorful imaginations. I grew up in the city. Yes, I reviewed your history. Daniel stepped between us. Stay away from her. Malcolm leaned closer. You always did choose emotion over discipline. Nathan had the same weakness. Daniel's hand tightened. I placed my fingers around his wrist. Not to forgive him. To remind him not to become what Malcolm expected. The speech began at 9. Malcolm stood beneath the company logo and spoke about stability, progress, and the future. Behind him, enormous screens displayed images of Harrison Global projects around the world. Then the screen changed. Nathan's face appeared. The ballroom became silent. If you are watching this, Nathan said, Malcolm knows I have discovered the LAN network. Malcolm turned toward the control booth. Stop this. The door is locked. Samuel had taken control of the building's internal system. Financial records filled the screens. Bank transfers. Shell corporations. Bribes. Forged signatures. Then appeared the final file. A recording from Nathan's car that we had not seen before. The hard drive contained a recovered audio track. Malcolm's voice could be heard speaking outside the vehicle. You should have left this alone. Nathan answered, Ethan knows enough. No, he knows what you allowed him to know. If anything happens to me, he will expose you. Malcolm laughed. Then he will join you. Gasps spread through the room. Several guests began filming with their phones. Malcolm stepped away from the stage. 2 men moved toward Daniel. Federal investigators entered through the side doors. For one hopeful second, I believed it was over. Then every light in the ballroom went out. People screamed. Someone struck me from behind. When I opened my eyes, I was inside a private office high above the city. Malcolm stood near the window. Adrian was beside him. I stared at my former fiancé. You. Adrian avoided my eyes. Malcolm poured himself a drink. Mr. Cole has been useful. You helped them attack us. Adrian shook his head. I did not know anyone would be hurt. You never know, that is how cowards excuse everything. Malcolm placed a document on the desk. It was a statement claiming that Daniel had manipulated the evidence and forced me to participate. You will sign this, Malcolm said. No. Then your village will lose more than its land. He placed photographs in front of me. Explosive charges had been positioned near the old mountain reservoir above Willow Creek. If the reservoir wall failed, water and debris would sweep through the village. My breath stopped. You're bluffing. Perhaps. Adrian looked horrified. You said we were only going to frighten her. Malcolm smiled. I say many things. For the first time, Adrian seemed to understand the kind of man he had chosen to serve. Malcolm pushed the statement toward me. Signed. I picked up the pen. Then I looked at Adrian. You told me once that successful men take what they want. He swallowed. Emily, is this what success looks like? Malcolm checked his watch. You have 60 seconds. Adrian moved suddenly. He struck Malcolm's arm and grabbed the photographs. Malcolm's security guard lunged toward him. I threw the glass from the desk. It shattered against the guard's face. The office door opened. Daniel entered with 2 investigators. Everything happened at once. Malcolm reached inside his jacket. Daniel moved in front of me. A gunshot cracked through the room. Daniel fell. For one terrible second, the world became completely silent. Then, investigators tackled Malcolm. Adrian shouted for help. I dropped beside Daniel. Blood spread across his white shirt near his shoulder. His eyes searched for mine. Are you hurt? He whispered. Even then, that was his first question. No. Willow Creek. Adrian has the photographs, we can warn them. Daniel tried to smile. I told you I would never let you face a difficult night alone. I pressed my hands against the wound. You are not allowed to turn this into a final speech. Emily. No, stay with me. His eyes began to close. I leaned closer. I still haven't decided whether to forgive you. That brought the faintest smile to his face. Then I suppose I have to survive. Yes, I said through tears, you do. Daniel survived. The bullet passed through his shoulder without striking a major artery. Malcolm was arrested along with several board members, security officials, and government representatives connected to the land network. Adrian provided evidence in exchange for reduced charges. He still went to prison. Not for as long as I believed he deserved, but long enough to understand that expensive suits did not protect a person from every consequence. The Willow Creek explosives were removed before anyone was harmed. Nathan's evidence led to investigations across 6 countries. Harrison Global's board was dissolved. Hundreds of families received compensation for land taken through illegal contracts. The Willow Creek Resort project was canceled permanently. Everyone called Daniel a hero. I did not. Heroes belonged in stories where one courageous act erased every mistake. Real life was more difficult. Daniel returned to the village after leaving the hospital. Reporters followed him, but he refused interviews. The first thing he did was repair the roof. I found him standing on a ladder with one arm in a sling. You are supposed to rest, I said. The roof is leaking. It has been leaking for 3 years. Yes, but now I can afford better materials. I crossed my arms. You could always afford better materials. He looked ashamed. That was intended as a joke. It was a bad one. I have been told billionaires are not funny. By whom? Mostly you. For a moment, the old warmth returned. Then the silence between us remembered everything. Daniel climbed down. I found a place nearby, he said. I can stay there while you decide what you want. This is your house. It became our home. You lied to me inside it. I know. I looked at the repaired roof. What happens to the company? I will remain temporarily to complete the investigations and restructure the board. Then, I don't know. You always know. No, I used to pretend I knew because uncertainty terrified me. He sat on the porch step. I thought money could control uncertainty. If I had enough power, enough information, enough people, I could prevent loss. Did it work? No. I sat several feet away. Daniel removed the wooden ring from his finger and placed it between us. I will give you a divorce if that is what you want. I stared at the ring. What do you want? You. That is not enough. I know. What else? To become someone you can trust. You cannot become that because you say it. I know. You keep saying that. Because for most of my life, I believed understanding a mistake was the same as repairing it. It isn't. His eyes met mine. I hid my name because I was afraid. Then I allowed you to build a life on that lie because losing you frightened me more than betraying your trust. That was selfish. I said nothing. I love you, he continued, but love without honesty becomes possession. I understand that now. Do you? I am trying. I looked toward the mountains. What are you going to do with your shares? I have created an independent trust. A large portion of the profits will return to communities harmed by the company. That sounds like a public relations statement. It does. What will you personally do? He's thought carefully. I will attend every hearing. I will meet the families. I will listen when they tell me that my family's company destroyed their lives. I will not hide behind lawyers. And Willow Creek. The village will own its surrounding land collectively. No company, including mine, will be able to purchase it without a public vote. You arranged that. The villagers arranged it. I only paid the legal fees. I almost smiled. Daniel pushed the ring toward me. You do not have to answer today. For the next 6 months, we lived separately. Daniel spent part of each week in the city and part in Willow Creek. When he returned, he stayed in a small room above his workshop. He never entered our house without permission. He answered every question I asked. Sometimes the answers hurt. He told me about his former life, the parties, the private flights, and the people who treated relationships like business deals. He admitted that before Nathan's death, he had been arrogant. He had judged people by their education and influence. He had ignored his mother's illness because he believed work made him important. The Daniel I loved had been real. But Ethan had been real too. To forgive him, I had to accept both. I began meeting with a counselor in the city. Not because I was weak. Because betrayal changes the way a person interprets every memory. I needed help separating what had happened from what fear told me had happened. Some memories remained beautiful. My mother laughing in Daniel's house during the storm. The nights he slept beside our front door. The wooden ring. His hand reaching for mine at the funeral. Those moments were not false simply because his name had been. But truth did not erase pain either. Daniel waited. He did not send expensive gifts. He did not buy a mansion. He did not use money to make forgiveness easier. Every morning he was in Willow Creek, he left 1 cup of tea outside my door. No note. No demand. Just tea. Sometimes I drank it. Sometimes I let it grow cold. He continued bringing it. 1 year after Malcolm's arrest, the village clinic opened a new treatment wing. It was named after my mother. The Margaret Carter Community Health Center. Daniel had offered to fund the entire project, but the village refused. Instead, every family contributed something. Money, labor, wood, food for the workers. Daniel's foundation paid for medical equipment, but his name did not appear on the building. During the opening ceremony, I stood beneath a photograph of my mother and spoke about the final months of her life. When she returned to Willow Creek, I said, She believed she was coming home to die. Instead, she reminded all of us how to live. I looked toward Daniel. He stood at the back of the crowd, wearing the same worn jacket he had worn the day we met. The jacket had been repaired so many times that almost none of the original fabric remained. After the ceremony, I found him near the river. I thought billionaires wore better clothes, I said. He looked down at the jacket. This is sentimental. It has 3 different kinds of stitching. 4. I stood beside him. The repaired bridge stretched across the river. Do you remember what you said the day we met? That I was mostly harmless. You were wrong. I know. I looked at him. He smiled carefully. There were new lines around his eyes. The past year had changed both of us. Samuel told me you are leaving the company, I said. The new board has been approved, my work is finished. What will you do? I thought I might repair engines. Your motorcycle has not started in 2 months. Patricia is complicated. You are terrible at repairing engines. He laughed. I had missed that sound. Then his expression became serious. I may teach at the village school. They need someone for business and mathematics. You have degrees from 3 universities. And yes. Do the students know? No, they think I am the man whose motorcycle never starts. That may be better. We stood in silence. Finally, I removed something from my coat pocket. The wooden ring. Daniel's eyes widened. I found it on the porch after you moved out, I said. I thought you had thrown it away. I thought about it. He nodded as though he understood. I cannot return to the marriage we had, I said. His face fell, but he did not look away. That marriage was built on a secret. And yes, if we try again, it has to be something new. Hope appeared in his eyes, fragile and frightened. What are you saying? I am saying I still love you. He took 1 step closer. I never stopped. I know, but love is not the same as trust. No. And I am not promising that everything will be easy. I would not believe you if you did. I may ask questions you have answered before. I will answer again. I may become angry when people call me Mrs. Harrison. I can become Mr. Carter. I laughed. You would do that. I have used enough names. I held out the wooden ring. Ask me again. His eyes filled with tears. Here. This is where the first lie began. Daniel took the ring. Then he lowered himself to 1 knee on the muddy riverbank. Emily Carter, I have loved you as a coward, as a liar, as a broken man, and as a man trying to become better. His voice shook. I cannot promise that I will never make another mistake, but I promise that I will never again decide that my fear is more important than your right to the truth. He held up the ring. I have wealth I did not earn, a name I once hated, and a past I cannot change. None of those things are the life I am asking you to share. He glanced toward Willow Creek. I am asking you to share the ordinary mornings, the leaking roofs, the difficult conversations, the tea that grows cold outside the door. I was crying by then. Will you choose me again, knowing all of me this time? I looked at the man kneeling before me. Not the poor village mechanic. Not this hidden billionaire. Not Daniel. Not Ethan. Just the complicated, imperfect human being I loved. Yes, I said. He slid the wooden ring onto my finger. It still fit. We did not hold another enormous wedding. We renewed our vows in the same village church with the same pastor and many of the same guests. This time, Daniel's suit fit properly. Martha complained that the fabric was too expensive. My father attended and sat in the front row. He had changed too. The scandal forced him to confront the way he measured people. For months, he volunteered at the clinic and never once mentioned Daniel's fortune. Before the ceremony, he came into the small room where I was preparing. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For what?" "For teaching you that security and wealth were the same thing." I looked at him in the mirror. "You were afraid after Mother became sick." "And yes." "You thought money could protect us." "And yes." "It couldn't." "And no." He took my hand. "Your mother was right, you chose a man with a good heart." I smiled. "He is still working on it. Aren't we all?" Daniel and I never moved into a mansion. We rebuilt the wooden house but kept the original porch and the crooked kitchen window. Daniel insisted the window had character. I insisted it had been installed badly. That argument has never been resolved. He continued teaching at the school and serving on the Harrison Community Trust. Several times a year, he traveled to meet families affected by the corporation's past actions. I went with him when I could. We heard stories that were difficult to carry. Homes destroyed, businesses lost, parents who died waiting for compensation. Daniel never asked them to forgive him. He simply listened. The company remained profitable, but its purpose changed. Employees could report corruption without fear. Community approval became mandatory for major land projects. Executive bonuses were tied to environmental and social results, not only financial growth. Some investors left. Others stayed. Daniel said that money leaving for the right reason was not a loss. As for Adrian, he wrote to me once from prison. He apologized. I did not answer. Forgiveness does not always require reopening a door. Malcolm was convicted of financial crimes, conspiracy, and Nathan's murder. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Samuel retired and moved to a small home near Willow Creek. He claims he came for the mountain air. Everyone knows he came because Martha's soup is the only thing he enjoys more than arguing. 3 years after our second wedding, I gave birth to a daughter. We named her Margaret Nathan Harrison Carter. Daniel wanted her to have every family name, so she would know exactly where she came from. When she was 2, she began following him into the workshop and hiding his tools. He accused me of teaching her. I told him she had inherited his gift for creating secret identities. He did not find that funny. I did. Sometimes visitors come to Willow Creek hoping to see the hidden billionaire. They expect bodyguards, luxury vehicles, and helicopters. Instead, they usually find Daniel pushing Patricia up the hill because the motorcycle has broken down again. He could buy any vehicle in the world. He refuses. It reminds me to remain humble, he says. I believe he is simply stubborn. People often ask me whether I regret marrying him. The answer is complicated. I regret the lies. I regret the months of pain. I regret that fear stole so much time from us. But I do not regret the storm. I do not regret the broken bridge. I do not regret the poor village man who carried my mother through the rain. Because that man was real. So was the billionaire. So was the frightened brother. So was the husband who brought tea to my door for 6 months without asking me to drink it. We are all more than one version of ourselves. Love does not mean pretending the darkest version does not exist. Love means seeing the whole person clearly and deciding whether the person they are becoming deserves a place beside you. One evening, years after everything happened, Daniel and I sat on the porch watching our daughter chase fireflies. The mountains were purple beneath the sunset. The clinic bell rang in the distance. Daniel reached for my hand. "Are you happy?" he asked. I looked at our house. The roof no longer leaked. The kitchen window was still crooked. A billionaire was wearing old boots beside me. Our daughter was laughing in the grass. Yes, I said, but not because you were secretly rich. I know. Do you? He smiled. You married me when you thought I owned 2 shirts. You did own 2 shirts. I owned several buildings containing shirts. I pulled my hand away. That answer is exactly why people dislike billionaires. He laughed and took my hand again. Then he became quiet. What do you think your mother would say if she could see us? I looked toward the oak tree, where the evening light passed through the leaves. She would say she told me you had kind eyes. Daniel nodded. She was always right. Not always. When was she wrong? She trusted you to take care of my heart. His smile faded. I failed. For a while. He looked at me. And now. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Now we take care of it together. That is the truth money could never buy. The richest life is not the life where nothing breaks. It is the life where 2 people learn how to repair what can be repaired, grieve what cannot, and continue choosing honesty after the fantasy has disappeared. I married a poor village man. He turned out to be a hidden billionaire. But the greatest surprise was not the money, the company, or the black cars outside our home. The greatest surprise was discovering that, beneath every identity he had carried, there was still a man capable of changing. And beneath every fear I carried, there was still a woman strong enough to decide what forgiveness should cost. Sometimes love deserves a second chance, but only when the truth is finally allowed to enter the room. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. And be honest. Could you forgive Daniel after discovering the truth, or would you have walked away forever? Whatever your answer is, remember this. Never judge someone only by what they own. But never allow love to convince you that honesty does not matter. A humble life can hide enormous wealth. And sometimes, enormous wealth can hide a deeply wounded heart. Until our next story, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and never be afraid to choose the truth.